Welcome to our study on Proverbs, Lesson 2. We will be studying Proverbs chapter 1, starting with verse 8 through the end of chapter 3. I am Pastor Barth for you today.
I'm not going to write on this. Can I borrow a book here?
No.
This one?
No.
I don't have anything then.
Here. Pastor Barth is at Pastor's Conference for the several days. He will be back later this week, he and Debbie. Our hymn on the lesson paper here. Steve, would you read the hymn, please, for us? Do you have that with you?
They don't have it pulled out yet. We got it.
Okay.
You want me to read it?
Okay, please.
The law of God is good and wise, and sets his will before our eyes, shows us the way of righteousness, and dooms to death when we transgress. The law is good, but since the fall, its holiness condemns us all. It dooms us for our sin to die, and has no power to justify. To Jesus we for refuge flee, who from the curse has set us free, and humbly worship at his throne, saved by his grace through faith alone.
And let us pray. Almighty God, to know you is to receive everlasting life. Grant that we may know you through your Son, Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Following his steps, may we steadfastly walk in the way of life. Amen. What I would like to do for this lesson is there are several of the questions here that Pastor Barth thought were very important ideas, and we have the answers to those. And we can go over those right now. Question number 1. Today we have well-organized schools with professional teachers. How were things different for ancient Israelite families? What does Deuteronomy 6:4-9 reveal about the place of education and the teachers? Do any of you have an answer you'd like to share?
The teaching should be done in the home by the parents.
Say it again.
Yes, the teaching should be done in the home by the parents.
Yes. Education took place mainly in the home and was led by the parents. Thank you. Question 2. A feature of the Book of Proverbs that confuses some readers is the use of repetition. Many of the Proverbs seem almost word for word the same. Other Proverbs convey the same thought in different words. How may Deuteronomy 6:6-7 help us understand the repetition in the Book of Proverbs? Anyone choose to answer?
I put they should be a part of our daily lives and upon our heart. That's what the verses say. Yes.
Thank you. The author who wrote the question gives his answer. Deuteronomy describes an educational process based on memorization, learning things through repetition. The word translated impress also describes the process of sharpening drawing a tool repeatedly over a whetstone. So what is the key here? Memorizing. When's the last time you heard somebody say, memorize something? It goes back to your childhood, I'm sure. Today's age, nobody, the young kids, they don't memorize. Yeah, it's on the phone, it's on the computer, whatever. I want to know something, there it is. I don't have to remember it.
No, I found though, with getting older, sometimes you have to memorize where you put something or make some kind of something that you will remember where that was, and then you forget where that was. But anyway, you know.
Memorize something for the old age, absolutely, yes. It's interesting, I'm using my mother's Bible, and she used this one later in life quite a bit. She underlined memorize. Okay, question number 3. Deuteronomy 6:20-25 describes a typical learning by the way, memorize, I want to mention one more thing. When you were in confirmation class, when you were in Sunday school, I'm guessing that at your age that we are at now, you had a lot of memorizing of Bible verses and such. All right? I did too. And I will tell you that that helped me many times later in life, not now so much because I've forgotten so many of them, being old like the rest of us. But it guided me in decision making when I was younger. Okay?
Our confirmation students here at our Redeemer don't do that, do they?
Do they memorize? I think Pastor has them do some memorizing.
Yeah, they have to memorize that. Yeah, I think Brian and Chris memorized a lot when they were there.
Good to hear. Pastor always tells us to.
And Sunday school, I'm sure that there's some memorizing in Sunday school. Yes, we do. Okay. Question number 3. Deuteronomy 6:20-25 describes a typical learning experience for an Israelite boy. Doesn't say girl, but says boy. Through a process of question and answer. What connection do you see between the goal of education in Deuteronomy and the theme of Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7? Proverbs 1:7 is, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline.
You get nowhere without discipline, and you need discipline to be educated. And education in the Christian faith is the one thing that keeps you in that faith, and with that faith, and in your heart. You know what you believe, and you know how you believe it, because you learned it.
Yes, thank you. And the author's answer to his question is parallel to what you said. The goal of instruction was to instill the fear of the Lord. Question 4. There is evidence that ancient Israel had some standards for education embodied in the study of specific texts. And some of that is still used. The commandment, which later Judaism called the Shema. It remains a standard today, which Jewish people recite as their creed. 2 Samuel and Psalm also mention the use of standard texts. Okay, how might these examples help us understand why Solomon collected Proverbs? How might they reveal the purpose of the different collections in the book of Proverbs? Well, the author's answer to his question, Solomon and others may have collected Proverbs to serve as education texts for specific ages or vocations. Question number 5. Proverbs 1:8 through chapter 7:27. That'll be a couple of lessons, this one and next one at least. Features 10 appeals or entreaties to follow the way of wisdom. The first appeal is in Proverbs 1:8 to 33, which we'll be doing shortly. From whom does one learn wisdom? From whom does one learn wisdom?
From fathers and mothers, that's what the Proverbs says.
Fathers and mothers.
And their teachers and other, from their aunts and uncles.
The family, aunts, uncles, parents, grandparents, they teach you. Primarily your parents. And his answer to his question, wisdom is learned from parents and wise teachers. Sinners attempt to entice one away from wisdom, which shows once more that wisdom is much more than knowledge. Wisdom is much more than knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Question 7. Instead of continuing with the theme of maintaining virtue and avoiding vice, Proverbs 1:20 shifts the focus. Wisdom takes center stage for the rest of the chapter and is pictured as publicly calling out an invitation. How are the three groups described in verse 22 different from one another?
Simple ones, mockers, and fools, the three different ones.
Simple ones, and the definition of simple on the footnote, where am I here? The Hebrew word rendered simple in Proverbs generally denotes one without moral direction and inclined to evil. One without moral direction and inclined to evil. Thank you. Question 10. The second appeal to follow the way of wisdom is in Proverbs chapter 2. Refusing wisdom is foolish, for wisdom carries such great benefits. Which benefits are mentioned in the following verses? And his answer to his question, understanding the fear of the Lord, understanding what is right and just, rescue from the way of the wicked, rescue from the adulteress, and walking in the ways of the good. These are not intellectual benefits, but are moral and spiritual in nature. Not intellectual benefits, but are moral and spiritual.
Are those pastor's responses or the text, the teacher's?
The responses I'm giving you are the author's answer to his own questions.
Well, he's mumbling it up, isn't he? They're separate. Psalm 1, 8 to 9, there's an answer there, so he just combines the thoughts together.
I took and combined, instead of going by verse, I just put it all together.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's interesting though in that proverb, it asks the person reading it to be saved from the adulterous wife, the one who wants to lead him away. But there are many women who are led away by an adulterer or husband of someone else, and that's not mentioned. Something to think about when you read this. I was thinking about that earlier because I read it earlier today. think it happens as often as it does with wives and women leading a man astray.
Yes, no argument with that. But let me read chapter 1, verse 8 and 9 ties in what you're saying. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. So here is recognizing both mother and father. But so then just, going through the rest of it, sometimes he doesn't take the time to speak about both father and mother, speaks father, and it's assumed in my thinking that father and mother are there together as a team, as a family. Because if you don't have a father and mother, you don't have a family. It's difficult to struggle with a one-parent family. Okay. Number 11, think of a person you know who is truly wise in the way described in Proverbs 1 and 2. What do you admire, or did you admire most about this person? How did or does that person affect your life? Comments?
Listening to a wise person, you become a better Christian because you're following.
Speak louder.
By listening to, I'm sorry, I lost count. Anyway, if you follow the words of the Lord, you will be a better Christian, and we must abide by that.
If you follow the words of the Lord, you will be a better Christian, a better person. Thank you. Anyone else?
In my family, there's a lot of really strong believers, and their love of Christ brought me to Christ. And I'm guided every day by thinking, how would they do something, or what would they think of this or that. So
Thank you. An example, thinking back, what would they do? They believe, how would they act? They've given you guidance. Thank you.
yes, right.
When I think of my mother and father and their example, we had daily devotions every night before we went to bed. We always read. Portals of Pearl was, of course, at that time always available, and that's what my mother would read it. But we never went to bed without it. My father, in Iowa, it would snow. Sometimes we'd show up at church and be about 5 people there. But we were there.
Every Sunday.
It was that type of life that I lived with my family. My mother was a wonderful Christian woman. My father was a great example of being a very strong Christian man. My mother at times could be rather motherly, and could she also be kind of the other way. And my father, though, was a very strong man and was a very strong influence on my life. And I'll never forget him. He was taken away from us when he was only 62. But I still wonder why, Lord, did it have to be that soon?
Thank you. And let me just throw out a thought here that when you were thinking about getting married and what you wanted in a person, in a spouse, whether you're man or woman, one of the things that I really appreciated and wanted was what Norma just described, having a strong faith in God. That was important to me, and it was important to her. And that's been one of the blessings in our marriage. Okay, his answer to the question, especially the wise person's intimacy with God, verses 5 and 10. Especially the wise person's intimacy with God, closeness with God. having an understanding of God, what He wants, what He promises, what His discipline is, the things that you go through in an adversity. That's a discipline that He is using to straighten us out. If we're wise enough to stop and look back and put it into God's Word in the Bible and say, okay, God, you've got my attention. Question 14. Well, we'll skip that one. But Pastor had thought that the word blessed in the first word of Proverbs 3:13 and the last word of Proverbs 3:18, the word blessed is the first word in those sentences. Thus, a section is marked off with a theme: wisdom provides blessing. The author's answer is a long one, and I did not bother to put it down, but if you would like, I can look it up, or any of you have a thought to this. Otherwise, we'll move on. The last one that Pastor has marked as one that he'd like us to think about, question number 16. A life characterized by the fear of the Lord also results in wise treatment of others. A life characterized by the fear of the Lord also results in wise treatment of others. Verses 27-32 offer 5 prohibitions, just as in verses 3-12 had contained 5 commands. So, 5 commands, and here are 5 prohibitions. You can't do this. Commands, you must do this. All on wise relationships with neighbors, your neighbors. Proverbs 3:27. The prohibitions are against withholding good. Are against withholding good. 28, or even delaying it. Verse 29, plotting harm against neighbors. Prohibition, don't do it. Verse 30, making false accusations against your neighbor. Don't do it. Verse 31, and envying or emulating the violent. The violent actions, the violent person. You want to be that. You want to do it. No, you don't. One of the things that in the lesson at the very top up here, right up top there, it says in this booklet to read pages 6-8. I will not read them, but I want to call it to your attention. Respecting our parents. Respecting our parents. And it opens with a verse from Proverbs. Listen to your father who gave you life, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Proverbs 23, verse 22. And it ends with Proverbs 23, verse 25. May your father and mother be glad. May she who gave you birth rejoice. Now, what are the topics here? The gift of life, wisdom of experience, our gifts to parents, our responsibility back to our parents. The Father in heaven. And they have a picture here. Here we have Grandma and Grandpa. Here we've got Father, and one of these two ladies has to be Mother. And we've got grandson and probably a granddaughter. And you can think back, just as I can, to family relationships, going to visit Grandma and Grandpa, getting all the aunts and uncles together, and the good times, the pleasantness of it. Sometimes when you messed up and you did something you shouldn't have done, the discipline that came with it. Okay. Now, I would like to read these Bible verses rather than have you read them, because I want to stop and comment or give a couple of comments that Pastor left to be shared with you.
What verses are there? Where are they? In Proverbs?
In Proverbs, we're going to be reading Proverbs chapter 1. Proverbs chapter 1. It's right, Proverbs comes right after the book of Psalms. Now, last week, lesson number 1, we covered chapter 1, verse 1 through 7. And that was the purpose and theme of Proverbs. Now, we're going to start with verse 8, chapter 1, verse 8, and go through the end of chapter 3. Exhortations to embrace wisdom. I want you to embrace wisdom, is what it's saying. And here's why. Okay? Warning against enticement. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. In other words, something special because of the teaching that you learned from your parents. It's going to be good for you. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, come along with us, let's lie in wait for someone's blood. Let's waylay some harmless soul. Let's swallow them alive like the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We will get all sorts of valuable things and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we will share a common purse. When I was still teaching in junior high school, I had a class once. I substituted in a class a small number of junior high school students. And we got on to this discussion of gangs. And a couple of the kids were saying, well, being in a gang is replacing my family that is not a family. There's only a mother, or there's only a father, or they don't get along, or one of them is drunk all the time, or whatever all the problems that are going on. The gang says, hey, come on, be with us. Just like we just read from Proverbs. We'll be your family. And you do what we want, and we will do what you want. And
That's still today, isn't it?
oh, yes.
Still today.
Yes. Comments?
Say it louder. Say it louder.
I said the Crips gang started in New York in 1850, and they are still in Los Angeles. That's how old some of these terrible gangs are. And they're out just to do mean things, because they don't care about people. And some of them do come from bad homes, some of them don't. But they
She started her comment by saying that the Crypt Gang started in New York in 1850, and it, of course, went all around the country, and we have it in Los Angeles also. A violent, very violent gang.
On the other hand, though, many of us have friends that we've had for years. I'm still very close friends with two people that I graduated from high school with. And it's always special to hear from them when we get letters and send letters to each other. It's always very special. Good friendships are also a special blessing from people. And thank God we have those friendships at our church, among people, among men and women at our church. And that's a real blessing that we all have as far as with our Christian faith.
Thank you. Starting with verse 20, warning against rejecting wisdom. Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. Aha! What is wisdom being called and referred to? Christianity?
It's a female.
Female. Wisdom is a female reference here in the Bible. She. Okay? Wisdom calls aloud on the street. She raises her voice in the public squares. And by the way, she is going to be receiving, should be receiving our respect and our care and appreciation and walking with. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out. And there is a footnote at the bottom about streets. Up on the high walls, the wall around a city, walking in the top for defense and for safety, or in the noisy street down below. She cries out. In the gateways of the city, she makes her speech. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? And now the simple ones, the footnote says, generally denotes one without moral direction and inclined to evil. So in Proverbs, a simple person, a simple one, is one who is without moral direction. There are no morals guiding you to say yes or no. And inclined to evil. Would rather be doing evil than doing something good. Okay? So how long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery and fools hate knowledge? If you had responded to my rebuke, rebuke, discipline, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. This is wisdom talking still. But since you rejected me when I called, and no one gave heed when I stretched out my hand, since you ignored all my advice and would not accept my rebuke, I in turn will laugh at your disaster. So the coin is being turned over. There are two sides to every coin. There are two sides to the table, top and bottom, and good and evil. And here's, I in turn will laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm. When disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind. When distress and trouble overwhelm you. So here's God speaking. Wisdom. You don't listen to me? Then here's what you get. And I'm going to look at you and laugh. I'm not going to step in to keep it from happening because you rejected me. You do not believe and trust in me. You went your own way. When I rebuked you, you did not learn from the rebuke. You kept going. That's your choice. You live with it.
You know, as I was reading this, it made me think that between Solomon and Moses, there's so much similarities that both of them telling us how to live, showing us, teaching us how to live. Moses and Samuel with Moses, the Ten Commandments, and Samuel with this, maybe, I don't know if they were, poets, conspirators or what, but anyway, it looked like between the two, things were getting, we needed to be told,
You are referring back to the prophets in the Old Testament and the warnings that they gave and the teachings they gave to the people from God through them. Yes. Okay. Verse 28. Then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but will not find me. Now, how does God say, if you repent, I will bless you, I will keep you, I'll bring you to me? Yes. Yes, he does. But now here then in verse 28, then they will call to me, but I will not answer. How serious is their call? Do they know God? Or is it just, hey, I heard somebody once say God can do, so I'm going to call on God. They don't know who God is. They don't know who they're calling.
They only want release from whatever it is that's bothering them. They don't care about learning about God or His wisdom or anything else. They want from God, like you want something. Yeah, it's their self-interest. It's nothing to do with God.
Yes. I want relief from my problem right now. I don't care how I get it. If this God or that God or this other God of yours will do it, thank you. I'll be on my way again. Yeah, that's yeah.
It's not a sincere seeking.
I didn't read it that way. Couldn't think of better. They don't have faith.
Verse 29, since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, choose. They did not choose to fear the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke. So you can learn through a rebuke. Oh, yes. When I was in high school, junior high school, at that time, the teachers could still use the paddle. And if I didn't learn something from here, I learned it from the behind. And I really didn't want to keep learning from the behind. It didn't feel very good. So that got you back on thinking, yes, I listened then. Since they would not accept my advice and spurned my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. I don't have to do anything. I'm complacent. I don't, forget you. Okay? It's going to destroy you. Verse 33, but whoever listens to me will live in safety. So here's a but. That's the contrast. But whoever listens to me will live in safety. The other side of the coin. So we assume that if you are listening to God, it's making sense to you. So let's finish that verse as I turn the page. But whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. So that's walking with God. On verse 5, chapter 2, verse 5, Pastor wanted us to hear this. The fear of the Lord, that's faith. Faith, believing and trusting in God. We put our life into God's hands. We put our life into God's hands. When things are good, when things are bad, when the devil's working against us, the fear of the Lord, that's faith, faith in God. We put our life into God's hands and go forward. Okay. Chapter 2, moral benefits of wisdom. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, and that's where my mother had written memorize in the margin here, memorizing, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, and if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, what would that be? What do we call it today? When you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding? What? Complain? What?
I say prayer.
Prayer. Prayer.
Confession and receiving forgiveness.
Yeah. Prayer includes everything you're talking about, everything you're thinking about when you're directing it to God. And if you call out, if you pray, you ask God, and you're sincere and you're ready to accept what He brings or does not bring, or when He chooses to bring it. Okay? Verse 4, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, remember that was included in one of Jesus' parables, looking for that and finding it, what you do with it. Okay, so if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord. You will understand faith, your faith in God and relationship there. And that's my own words thrown in. So we've got a bunch of thens. If you do this, then this is going to happen. The other side of the coin that goes with it. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Verse 6, for the Lord gives wisdom, and from His mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For He guards the course of the just and protects the way of His faithful ones. This is describing wisdom and what God does with those who are faithful to Him, who believe and trust in Him, who study in His Word, who walk in His ways, are encouraged by others who believe. And as all of us in this room, we don't have any youngsters with us. We don't have any people who are younger. They are at their jobs. As we look back on our life with all of the experiences we've had, what we've gone through, both good and bad, and we've grown and we stay with the Lord in faith and trust, the Lord has blessed us. And that's what He says He will do. And we can look back in our own lives and see where He has indeed blessed us and where He also has disciplined us, which helped us to go back to God and do what He wanted again, what He wants. And I have a story. I'm not planning to share it with you now, but I'll mention to you when I was in the Army and serving in Germany back in the mid-50s, I tried to put God out of my life, but He wouldn't let me. And I thank God for that. Yes. Well, I will mention what brought it to me. I'm driving my car back on the Autobahn late on a Saturday night. And I probably hadn't been doing what God wanted me to be doing. I fell asleep while driving. I wake up suddenly between a row of 50-gallon barrels or drums filled with sand. There's one barrel missing. I drove right through it. I slow down, I turn around, and come back out. Now, let me tell you this. In World War II, the bridge over that canyon had been destroyed. After the war was over, a tractor with a blade on it went down and made a road, carved out the other side so that when you hit the Autobahn at that place, all those barrels painted a bright yellow across and close together kept you from going through. Now, from those barrels to the edge where the road ended, there was a big pile of dirt. So if you went through the drums, you would stop in the dirt. I drove back out and went down and went home. Sunday morning early, I got up, I drove back to where it was. There were my tire tracks in the dust. I had never seen in the year and a half there a barrel missing. And there were no barrel missing when I was there, and when I finally left and returned to the States, no barrel was missing. God got my attention, you can believe it. And I'm sure each of you can share many stories, many times in your life where God has acted and you've seen a miracle, where you've seen God working in your life. And if somebody should ask you, in fact, a neighbor's son to us, he's probably 30 to 40, he attends a church, and he was mentioning to me a couple of weeks ago, we were out in front, got to talking, and he said, "Mr. Horn, did you ever have a miracle in your life?" I shared that with him, and I tried to get him to be thinking about all the times that a miracle had happened in his life that he may not have thought about yet. But an interesting relations or actions that God will put you into to share His word with somebody else, or for you to listen to somebody who comes and asks about a relationship with God, and He's using you to share. That's a good thing, isn't it?
Yes. I just had one just Sunday.
Good.
By, don't you hear it? Okay, after church, I was talking to somebody, and I had gone to the early service, and then I stopped and got gas. I get home, and I open the door, and I smell gas. Okay, my cat's in there, right? So I go in real fast, turn off the thing, and the fan on, and where's the cat? Where's the cat? He was laying on the bed in the spare bedroom, but I had left the window open a little bit. And I grab in, and I've got to find his leash and stuff, because I can't take him outside when he's not in that stuff. Went into my bedroom, and I nearly fell over myself. And anyway, and I got him out there, and they came down, had gone 3 stories up. Evidently, this cat had walked on the stove and came down, because this one window that he likes to watch people come in, so I don't use it to prepare food. I let him get up there. That's his one. I put his food there and put him down and stuff. That's our morning thing. And evidently, he had turned that on. Now, I was sure that cat would be dead when I walked in there with their tiny little lungs. I mean, he's frisky and running around and everything now, and I mean, that's his second life. But I mean, the first life, he was thrown out of a car window. When I got him, somebody brought him to me. So he's got 2 lives, but an angel had to be with that cat, or nature, or God had to show him to that window that was open to be breathing the fresh air. Now I have to leave him in the other bedroom, because his cat box is in the spare bedroom bathroom. So the manager said the cat has to stay in there when you leave.
Yeah.
Came home yesterday, and I had shut the bedroom door, and here he is at his perch, and I said, what are you doing? I mean, Tiger, I mean, how did you get out? Well, I had a thing hanging over the door that you had to hang a robe or something on. It was not tight. And he had opened the door, that much to get out. So he probably thought it was going to happen again. But there I know an angel or God intervened to keep that cat from dying, or showing that cat, one or the other, where
Smarter
the
than
safe.
God. He's smarter than.
So I mean, that's a miracle right there, too.
Thank you. And I want you to think beyond the cat for a moment and think that here you have an apartment that is filled with gas, and if there had been a spark,
Yes.
what would have happened? Yes. Yes, indeed.
They smelled it 3 stories up.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now, what verse did we leave off on?
It's after 12.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What verse did we finish reading?
We started a little late.
I'm sorry.
I'll start with 6. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. 9. Then, the word then, then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. So God is working here, and this is what he's using with you to keep you safe. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. That doesn't mean that God is not in that. That means he's there with you, and this is what he's choosing to use with you. 12, wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who leave the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. It will save you also from the adulteress, from the wayward wife with her seductive words, who has left the partner of her youth and ignored the covenant she made before God. For her house leads down to death, and her paths to the spirits of the dead. None who go to her return or attain the paths of life. And yes, you can replace woman with man and come up with the same thing. Number 20. Thus you will walk in the ways of good men and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the unfaithful will be torn from it. Have you ever wondered, the Israelites were in Egypt, and God said, I'll take you out to the promised land. He takes them out, and eventually those people, they get into the promised land. And what do? They are soldiers, and they destroy all the people who are in that particular section at the time, and God moves his people in there. So they take over the buildings, the farms, the land, the animals. They take over all of that. In our thinking today, let's think of Ukraine and Russia. Would we think, hey, it's good, God, you're moving the Russians in to give them something good, and forget those evil Ukrainians? Well, that is what indeed God had in mind. These people that were in that land used idols. They rejected God. They were an abomination to God in his sight for what they were doing and not doing. And so this was his judgment. Judgment, the other side of what these people, and he destroyed them. Okay? Now, incidentally, the third time I tried to read through the entire Bible, I got started with the shortest books, Old and New Testament. There are 17 of them, and I checked them off as I read them. Well, when you get through with the short ones, you've got to go to longer ones and longer ones. But my immediate thought when I finished those 17 verses, books of the Bible, don't mess with God. Don't mess with God. Because there was law and there was justice. There was blessings and there was punishment. So, continuing here,
What time is Bible class over?
shortly. I think we now are starting chapter 3, and we'll go through quickly. Further benefits of wisdom. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Aha. Some people will say, well, I'm going to trust in the Lord. But when things get tough, forget God. You're not helping me. I got to trust myself. I've got to do it my way, God. And they falter. Number 6, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight, or direct your paths. Footnote. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. So what is verse 9? Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Think of Cain and Abel, the difference in what they looked at and thought and did, and how it pleased or displeased God, and then God's action. Okay? What about ourselves, our relation to our congregation? A congregation, as Pastor has pointed out repeatedly, a congregation that tithes, a congregation that sends some of its income, its money, its donations, to missions around the world, or to mission someplace, not here, not to our pantry, that's our mission, or not to our preschool, that's our mission. That's not good, that's close sight. But reaching out to spread God's word to other people that wouldn't get it unless we helped in getting it there. That's what pleases God, and He blesses that. He blesses us so that we can continue to do that and sharing God's word. Number 11, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent His rebuke. Aha, not easy to do, but it's wise. Don't despise it. Because the Lord disciplines those He loves, as a father the son that He delights in. The father disciplines an errant child. And hopefully comes back to believing and doing. Because the Lord disciplines those He loves, as a father the son He delights in. 13, blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding, for she is more profitable than silver, that's wisdom, and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Long life. Look around us. People who believe. Long life. That's a blessing from God. It's obvious as we can see it. Okay? 16, long life. I read that. 17, her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. Peace, not war. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding He set the heavens in place. Have you ever wondered how God put things together, how things work, and the time that it must have taken, the wisdom, the knowledge that it must have taken to conceive that? Look at the human body alone, just that alone. What if your arm did not have a joint and you want to eat? How are you? You're going to have to feed somebody else. They're going to have to feed you. What if the joint is not here, but the joint was up here or up here? I mean, this is just a very simple idea of thinking of how things all went together. And that was God. By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding He set the heavens in place. By His knowledge the deeps were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew. My son, preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let them out of your sight. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. Then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have no fear of sudden disaster or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked. For the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being snared. I want to come back to confidence in a bit. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbors, "Come back later. I'll give it tomorrow," when you now have it with you. Do not plot harm against your neighbor who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse a man for no reason when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a violent man or choose any of his ways, for the Lord detests a perverse man, but takes the upright into his confidence. Either way, you choose. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but gives grace to the humble. The wise inherit honor, but fools he holds up to shame. We have read through the end of the 3rd chapter. Let me go back to verse 26 for a moment. For the Lord will be your confidence and will keep your foot from being snared. I'm teaching ESL class. We had our 3rd ESL lesson last night. There is a couple, a husband and wife with their adult children, moved here from Iran 3 weeks ago. The first week, our first lesson, they'd been here 1 week. They came for ESL. How they got here and knew of us, I don't know. God's working, okay? The woman speaks good English, learned it there. The husband is learning English. Norma had the husband in her class last night and learned that they are Christian. Christians, they escaped or left, I don't know just all what it was, but they're here. And in our class, I also have Alejandro, a 19-year-old young man from Guatemala. He came here alone. He knew somebody here. I didn't ask whether it was family or somebody else, and I didn't ask how he got here. But here he is, and the woman who I just mentioned from Iran and the rest of the class, we had a short discussion on the meaning of a word, and we're talking about confidence. When the class ended, he came up and said, "Mr. Horn, can you help me get confidence?" Now, the Iranian lady, Ziga is her name, she was very outgoing. Alejandro is very quiet, very smart, but also quiet. So we talked for a while. And I mentioned, if you have a faith in God, pray. So we'll be following up with him again. Thank you for being here, and I hope that those of you who are watching on TV will also have a good understanding. Thank you. Our next lesson is 3. Our next lesson is 3 next week. Thank you. Goodbye.